Good morning and welcome to the Gold, Goats, and Guns podcast. My name is Luongo. We've got a lot to talk about today. It's episode 29. It's Tuesday, April 14th, 2020. And I've got with me something a little bit different than what we've been doing. We've been doing a lot of, finance and geopolitics, but this is something that actually bears in our normal thesis as well, which is the potential for expatting, especially if you're American and you're like me or beginning to really worry about where we're going. The idea of having another place that you can go is something that I know a lot of you in the audience are interested in. And I know we've gotten a lot of that feedback from my patrons. And so I was turned on to a man by the name of Gabriel Scheare, who's my guest this morning, by Whitney Webb, who was on the show a few weeks ago. And I just think that this is a great opportunity for us to sit and chat. Gabriel reached out to me earlier in the week. I said, hey, let's just do it. So Gabriel's down in Chile and is apparently a friend of Whitney's and has a place that they're developing called Fort Galt. And that shouldn't surprise anybody if you're in this community where that name comes from. So good morning, Gabriel. Welcome to the show. How are you this morning?
Hey, Tom, thanks for having me on here. Doing great. I mean, the weather's fantastic. Everybody's indoors and out of my way, and it's not too shabby down here.
Nice. And so I mean, I know the geography of Chile actually a little bit better than I do a lot of other countries, because my wife and I have actually considered that as one of our potential places. So for me personally, this is really going to be very interesting because I'm going to learn some granular information that I don't know. I've talked to patrons who in the past who have been in Chile and they were in Santiago and they hated it.
Yes.
And for a variety of reasons. And
Definitely.
We were never actually looking at Santiago when we were looking at the areas south of Santiago and that I had heard vaguely that there were a bunch of libertarians down there. And I thought, that doesn't surprise me at all. Let's get as far away from humanity as possible. And
Right.
as long as there's still internet service, we're good to go. So, that's kind of the way I look at it. Get me as far away from humanity as possible. And then, as long as there's internet, we're good. So, so tell me a little bit about, your story, where you're from, how you got to where you are and all of that stuff. And then we'll dig into the details in Fort Galt as we go along.
Sure. Just to touch on what you just said, though, I mean, you're absolutely right. We're basically as far away from quote unquote civilization that you can get and still have a nice fiber optic line. So,
believe me, that's better than me. So, I'm in the States. So,
I mean, I grew up in Canada. I'm a farm boy. Grew up on a small family organic farm and
whereabouts in Canada?
Saskatchewan, right in the middle.
Sounded like he had a Western Canadian accent. I'm a huge hockey fan, so I can kind of pick out the
Flames, Oilers.
Yeah. So Flames or Oilers?
Well, yeah. I mean, I listened to your show yesterday, and you used a phrase I hadn't heard in quite some time, and that was "keep your stick on the ice." I mean, I had never heard an American say that.
I used to watch the Red Green Show all the time. It was on
Red Green
on
is
PBS.
The man.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. Like him and Red Green, and that whole show is just unbelievable. Are you kidding?
He raised a whole generation to know that you can survive on duct tape alone. So.
Exactly. And it's funny. I picked up that line. I don't know where I did, but the first time I did a weekly kind of update when I took the job over at Newsmax, my first job over at Newsmax, and I was doing a weekly update for my newsletter subscribers, and I just had to end the show, and I'm like, keep your stick on the ice. And then it's just that's perfect. And we're just going to go with that. So sometimes the right brain knows better than everything else. And he just kind of left it as the tagline since then. So,
I mean, so growing up on a small farm out in the boonies and stuff, it was always frustrating for me because I was away from my friends. It was hard to get into town and socialize and stuff. And there was a sense of isolation, and I was always missing out on opportunities, and the jobs were scarce, and it was not a pleasant experience when that's all I knew. But then I got out in the world and lived in some big cities and stuff. I moved to Vancouver, and I lived in California for a little while, and holy smokes, I really started to gain an appreciation for the surroundings and just how things worked where I grew up. Because a city is after a while, I started seeing everything like farms, like the class that rules us, they're basically farmers just managing livestock.
Right.
And the
Absolutely.
feeling I got in cities was like they're high density feedlots. They're like factory farms,
No,
and
it's a really good metaphor, dude. It's
they're
really good, really strong.
yeah, and it's just unnatural. And you see animals start to freak out when they're in those kinds of conditions. They start to peck each other. They get weird ailments that they wouldn't
Mhm.
normally get, and they just turn into these psychotic shadows of their former selves. And
Mhm.
that's what I started to see when I lived in Vancouver. It was like where I grew up, everyone was kind of spaced a healthy distance apart from each other. So you had to kind of make an effort to reach out and spend quality time with your neighbors and get to know them. And there
Mhm.
were so many incentives for doing that. Like to really make a go of it on a small farm, you need a certain, access to tools and that sort of thing.
Absolutely.
And not everyone has the finances to just buy everything that they could want. So what naturally happens is like each farmer specializes in a few things,
Right.
like there's no need for every farmer to have a hydraulic post pounder,
Right.
but it's really good if one of them does and everyone else can borrow it.
Yep.
So that's what naturally happens. And so there's this incentive just baked into just the dynamic where you are a good neighbor because it's in your best interest to be one.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And in the city, that was just stripped away. And rather than putting the effort in to reach out and be a good neighbor, you put that effort into putting up blinds and fences and trying to shut people out because you're packed in too close.
Yep.
So I really,
I grew up in the suburbs and it was just
yeah,
of New York. It was the same thing. I can tell
right.
you, I mean, from the moment that, my parents bought the place that I grew up in, for example, we had fights with our neighbors who moved into the neighborhood, which was the whole thing was under construction and they were the first to move in. And things like they moved the property stakes, they had their washing machine draining out into our backyard. Our front door wound up on their in-laws' house. I mean, I can go on and on and on and on and on about this stuff. And this is the
Right.
crazy. And this was in the suburbs where we each had a half-acre plot, and I mean, and still the same kind of thing was going on. And what's interesting, what you're describing, and we bring it back to the raw economics of it, is that it's this classic division of labor. At the end of the
Yeah.
day, I'm good at raising goats. Well, I'm not necessarily good at raising goats, but I'm good at raising goats. Somebody else is good at raising ducks, and someone else is good at raising cows. And we have that kind of division of labor here in my community in North Florida. It's not a particularly large community, but I have my friend Brad who
Hmm.
likes to raise cows and shoot deer. He doesn't like to eat deer. Now we like to eat deer, but not necessarily shoot deer. So this all kind of works out really well. I've got a deer superhighway. He's got a rifle and a crossbow and every other implement of the deer destruction you can ask for, because he hunts half the year on my property and and the surrounding lots, and we get most of the deer and he distributes it out to family and friends and to us and everybody else, and it's all good, and no money changes hands, and everybody's happy with each other, and when we need something, because this guy is he works for the county public works, and he knows everybody. He's got a big family in the area. He's from the area, and we're not. And
Hmm.
so when we need something, we call Brad, and Brad usually has an answer for us. And it's a great relationship, and no one thinks twice about it. And we don't care about race, and don't care about where you came from, and all that stuff. It's just what it is, and it's a good, solid community of, and I've always said that, to like trying to add, people with post-apocalyptic skills to my
Hmm.
certain friends, because you never know. And so again, I don't know about you, but that's just the way we kind of worked this stuff out over time, and my wife and I
Yeah.
have both tried to add as many skills to our list as possible, because you know it is what it is, and we always knew that this moment in time was coming, and
Yeah.
when, I don't know, so they were.
And yeah, like that's something else that, of course, I noticed is that not only does everyone get all weird and psychotic in a city, but they're kind of useless too. They don't have any
Yeah.
basic skills, you
No,
know?
I
It's
think
like,
I think they called them useless leaders at some point. I'm not going to go. I'm not necessarily want to go there. I think a lot of people
oh
don't want to.
shit, I will.
Yeah, fair enough, and that's fine. But I think a lot of people don't want to be useless. I think
Right.
they don't know how to become
Right.
useful,
Right.
and that's because I hear it all the time. The thirst that I get from people to soak up the information that I have, having badly run a hobby farm in North Florida, is off the
Yeah.
charts.
Right.
And I'm happy to share what I've done right, what I've done wrong, and all the other stuff in order to help them if they decide they're going to make that switch. And you can just feel it. They want something different, and which is
Yeah.
a good thing. And as long as the impulse is there, that
Right.
that generates the energy necessary to make real societal change, in my mind. So
And just for your own mental well-being, like having basic survival skills, that's something that just gets kind of stored away in the back of your head, and you start to take it for granted after a while, and it's just who you are. It's not anything special to you. But in a city where you're surrounded by people that grew up on white bread and don't have any practical skills and would die in a zombie apocalypse, I mean,
mhm.
you can start to take it more, seriously. Like it's a huge ingredient of who you are. It's not just a little anecdotal piece of trivia that doesn't really matter. It's a large part of what makes you cool under pressure. It's what makes you the kind of person that people seek out for help. It's what makes you that pillar, that rock that people can lean on. And you may not see it yourself because you're so used to it, but others really appreciate it. And it's hard to teach, and it's hard to make others appreciate it because they're not trained to, they're not raised to. They're raised in public education systems that teach them that specialization is everything, and that being self-sufficient is silly, and that preppers are crazy people, and it's really hard to overcome all of that programming until they experience a situation where it all matters.
Yep.
So that's kind of the silver lining that I'm seeing with this whole COVID mess, is that it's giving everyone just a little taste, just a little dress rehearsal of things that are probably on the more distant horizon.
I think for the 17 million people in the United States that lost their jobs in the last 3 weeks,
Yeah.
I think that privation is coming quick.
Yeah.
And I've been talking about it a lot, that I think it's a very good thing, and they're prepping us for the Hunger Games.
Right.
And
so it's kind of tempting for people like us to seize this as our I told you so, but it's a huge opportunity for us to reach down and pick people up and say, you know what, it's not that hard. It's okay. Just hang with me for a few days and I'll show you the ropes, and it's not that hard.
Yeah. No, it's not an I told you so moment. It's a are you ready now? And we've said for a long, long time that thing. At the end of the day, good parenting skills are you reward the behavior you like and you ignore the behavior you don't. Well, it's the same kind of thing with friends and all of this. You just say, look, I'm not going to tell you I told you so. I'm going to say, are you ready? Because I've got stuff I can teach you. I don't know everything, but we can get started. And I'm sure there's something that you can do that will be useful if you're looking to. And I've been telling people for a long time, it's like, prepare yourself for a different world. And that means pick up different skills, pick up new ideas and integrate them into your life. Think about what happens if the current skill set you have becomes worthless. What do you do for a living?
Right.
So turn your hobby into the next thing you want to do in the next stage of your life, because you're not going to do the same thing for your entire life. I used to be a chemist. I used to work in laboratories and research stuff and run and manage researchers and the whole 9 yards. And I knew more acronyms than most people have hair on their head. And I don't have any on my head. But now it's a different world for me. I have different acronyms, certainly, but it's a different thing completely. And I did it on purpose. And I did it because I understood that there was that those skills could be applied in different ways and build a different and much more satisfying life than the one I had, because the other one I'd probably be dead by now. So.
Yeah. And also, I mean, people that aren't used to this self-sufficiency deal, they have this image in their head of what it is that's been painted for them by Hollywood, of this over the top Mad Max, you know, he can do anything. He's like a superhero kind of thing.
Right.
That makes it seem like an unattainable thing.
Right.
And it's so much easier to point and laugh at that than it is to take it seriously and think, what can I actually do? Right. When the fact of the matter is, none of us are like that. Right. None of us can do everything. None of us care to do everything. We all have
time to do everything.
Oh, heck, yeah. Like, being self-sufficient means you can survive, but to thrive, you need a community of people that you trust around you. Just decent neighbors. That's all it is. Well, just surround yourself with decent neighbors.
The division of labor is civilization. As civilization expands, the division of labor expands. And self-sufficiency is the Robinson Crusoe. It's the end of, it's the antithesis of civilization. You know, it's not to say that. So invariably, what we do, because the people who run this society, or at least think they run this society, are Marxists who use nothing but the straw man of, if not A, then B. Well, if you're not a person who, if you don't believe, if you're not fully on board with the social contract, then you must be this, crazy individualist prepper. If you want to have if you believe in any kind of individual rights, you don't believe in community at all. That's nonsense. And we libertarians have done a terrible job of marketing this. I've said this, our communitarian spirit. I've said this for years, that we're doing it all wrong. Yeah. And that it's very, very important to understand that we're actually the most communitarian of all of these quote unquote isms, because we're the ones who understand that civilization comes from respecting each other's rights and respecting each other's value to the point where we wouldn't dream of abrogating the other person's ability to find their place in the division of labor. But understand that the division of labor sometimes artificially expands through the application of fake money, and sometimes it contracts when that application of fake money then collapses on itself in an Austrian business cycle crack-up boom that we're going through right now. And it's during those periods that you want to have a baseline level of competence that you can then apply yourself to the world. That's where we are, and that's all we've ever been advocating. At least that's all I've ever advocated. I don't know, and it sounds like that's what you advocate. So let's talk about what you're doing down in Chile to put this into motion, because that's what it sounds like you're doing. So make it reality as opposed to just theory.
Around the time I hit my early 20s, I guess, I started to dip my toes into Ayn Rand objectivism and started going all down the road towards complete individualism and all that kind of stuff, because I was getting really fed up with the socialist construct that I was residing in at that time, which was Vancouver, Canada. Sure. And yeah, no kidding. but so that's what kind of started dragging me down that road of thinking. And by 2013, Bitcoin was really starting to take off, and I had my toes in that. And around that time also, I was seeing ads on YouTube for a real estate development project in Chile where a bunch of libertarians were going to move down there and buy land and start the Galts Gulch town out of Atlas Shrugged.
Absolutely.
And I thought, okay, well, that's it then. That's where all the cool kids are.
Nice.
I'm going to have to just sell all my shit and move down there ASAP.
Wow. Nice. I didn't have that option. Like the wife, when we finally had that the kind of spiritual awakening, as it were, it was within 3 years of that we were now child bound in that some way. So it was much more difficult for us to do it, and we also had family that we had to deal with, and we decided to try and protect our family as opposed to just protect, and that's why we are still where we are. So, but
pioneering is definitely a single man's job. You can't really send for the wife and kids until the homesteading is basically done. So, but so I made that leap of faith, and when I got down to Chile and I found this place, which was just a little bit west of Santiago, there was basically nobody there. Basically what was happening is a bunch of rich people all over the world were sending their gold bars and Bitcoin and stuff to this dude. and getting promises to sell them lots once the subdivisions were approved.
Right.
And these buyers didn't actually live in the area. They weren't on sites or anything. So there was just this one project manager there and a couple of employees in a sales office. So I thought, okay, well, this is definitely in its infancy, but it's a great idea, and I want to see if I can help somehow. So I just volunteered. I said, I don't know what you need done around here, but throw me at it, and I'll see what I can do. And
right.
I guess the timing was just right. Their IT guy had just quit, and so they needed somebody to manage the website and deal with customers through email and social media and all that kind of stuff. So I said, all right, I'll jump in and handle that. Very quickly, I started hearing from some very pissed off customers. A lot of theories and rumors were flying around about how legit this project was. And after a couple of months, it was pretty clear that it was a scam because these subdivisions, they didn't exist and they could never be legally approved because the area was environmentally protected. So there was basically $10 million that just got flushed down the crapper on this.
Wow.
And it was a big blight, a big blotch on the libertarian name, and it dragged the Galts Gulch name through the mud, and the left had a field day with it, and yeah, not fun. But I was then left with a decision to make. Do I head back to Canada and write this all off as a weird educational experience, or do I try to pick up the pieces and make something with it? And I'm kind of a stubborn dick at times, so I figured we should probably find a way to, use this somehow and keep going, because I really didn't want to give up on the dream. And a friend of mine in New York that I had met at an entrepreneurship boot camp, he had been kind of watching this from the sidelines, and he called me up and said, it looks like you could use some help down there. And so he offered to come down and help with kind of an effort to pick up the pieces and start over with this. And he had recently met somebody, this Patrick White from Arizona, who's a big fan of your show. And his dad had passed recently and left him with some money, and he was on the lookout for some farmland to buy in Chile because he had heard that was a great spot to invest in. So the three of us and Luke, that's the friend that called me up, his wife came along too. They all moved down to Chile, and we got an apartment together and took everything to the drawing board and said, okay, what kind of place do we want to live in?
Right.
And we started from scratch. I mean, we had enough money to live on ourselves for a short time, but we didn't have money to buy land with or to build with or anything like that. So we knew this would have to be a sort of a crowdsourcing, bootstrapping kind of a deal. So we just started with a website, throwing out the basic vision, saying, okay, this is what we have in mind. This is what we want to do. And fortunately, there was kind of an already existing audience because of the previous project.
Right.
So just through Facebook, we managed to gather a few people that were interested in what we wanted to do and trusted us to go about it in a proper fashion. And we started just kind of build a snowball very slowly at first. I mean, it's a very particular kind of person that's attracted to this sort of thing. It's not for everyone.
Nope.
So we just started building a team, and as more people join, they kind of contribute their voice to it as well, and the project takes on a life of its own. And over time, the design just kind of became what it is now. And because we didn't have the money up front to do all of this, and also because the trust in the general community had been shattered by the previous scam, we knew that we would have to take a very transparent and incremental approach to things. So rather than saying, okay, just send us all of your money up front and hope for the best,
right.
We said, okay, here's a roadmap with milestones. These are things that we have to get done. And so right now we're focused on getting this goal done. So let's say it's getting the architect to do up the official blueprints and doing engineering work and things like that. Okay, so we would package together this milestone and assign a certain amount of money to it that is required to get that done. We say, okay, everyone who has staked their claim in this project, send us 10%. And if everyone sends us 10% of what their room value is in this communal building, then we can get this done. And then that builds trust, right? They get to see, okay, I trusted them with this much, and they did good work with it. They fulfilled their promise. Now they need some more money to do the next step.
Right.
So as time goes, things get done one step at a time, and trust builds to the point now where we're a pretty solid group, and I don't think any of us distrust each other, and things have come along pretty well. I mean, it's a slow way of doing things, but it works. And you have time or you have money. You generally don't have both.
No, that is the way things work. That is the way of the world.
Yeah. So it's been a heck of a learning experience, and because this was our first project, we hadn't done anything like this previously. Sure. So we had to kind of learn as we went. So from that perspective, it was actually kind of good that it did take time, because we frankly needed time.
No, that makes perfect sense. If you're learning by doing, then you have to take the time. Just to give you an idea, I dove right into building a house. Like, I went from not being able to drive a nail straight to we built a house. And I'm looking at my house and I'm going, I'm a fair framing carpenter in the end, and not a good finish carpenter. That's fine. That's what, but money and time, we had the time. I worked at the university. I had more time off than I knew what to do with. I spent it all building my house. But I didn't have a lot of money. So we had to, figure out what we were going to do, how we were going to do it. And at every stage of the operation, my wife and I just kind of looked at each other and said, okay, well, we can do this or we can do that. We can have more roomage, or we can have, we can either have it finished or we can have more room. These are the options, right? So, and, at the end of the day, and over time, you just do with what you can. And what we've learned is how to, work miracles with nothing. And I was we were talking about this on a private live stream I did the other day. It's like, my wife has a PhD in redneck engineering, and she swears by the, duct tape, hay string, and cattle panels, right? We can do just about anything. You can run an entire hobby farm with those three items, and
definitely
a post hole digger, or a post banger and some deep posts. You can do so much with just that. We've proven this, right? But it's like everything else. So the kind of thing is, like, when I started building the house, though, my mom came up to visit from South Florida, and she was expecting to see nothing. She was expecting to see us just kind of, out here, in the North Florida heat, and she said this to me. She said, I expect to come out here and see a pile of crap. We were already working on the second floor. I mean,
nice.
She showed up, and we were working on the stairwell that morning, right? My friend Larry was building the treads to the stairwell that morning. And she was just flabbergasted. I'm like, I did acquire friends and family who know what they're doing and could instruct, along the way. And like everything else, people ask me, how do you build a house? I said, one board at a time.
Exactly.
It's just that simple. It's a series of, it's a million little tasks.
Yeah.
And that's what you guys are doing. And it's the same, building any business is that way. And building any project is that way. It's not one big decision. It's the big decision is getting started.
Yeah, definitely. And just committing to the process, because if you haven't done it before, if you haven't done anything like it before, it's intimidating. It can, it's a barrier for entry that's completely mental. It's completely psychological, but it's huge. Yeah. How many people do you meet, especially young people, who say, when I grow up, I'm going to be a real estate developer? Nobody.
Right.
And
I can go ahead.
Yeah, and like when you're 5 years into your first build and you're realizing how much longer it's taking than you thought it should, it can seem like you're wasting time. It can seem like you've wasted time and that you maybe should have been doing something else or whatever. But when you step back and see the big picture and you appreciate all the lessons you've been learning through the first build, you don't have to do those a second time. Those lessons, they're done and they are priceless. the second build I'm already starting on, and it's so much easier than the first one.
Of course. When I went into that project, it was building a house. I mean, my wife worked in the survey department of county public works. My father-in-law had built houses and built roads and had done surveying. I had a guy I worked with at the University of Florida did exactly the same thing that I did, except he did it on the south side of Alachua County, literally on the south side of County Line Road. So he'd pay 1/3 the taxes. Okay. And built his own house. He happened to also be a blacksmith. So when he wanted a custom piece of angle iron to fly his truck, to put his 6x10 beams in his house, he could just do that, right? He'd just go out into a shop and do that. Right. Not me. Right. But that's, these are the kinds of people I had around me to help me get through this. And they were all, unpaid help. But at the end of the day, I was the CEO and I was the general contractor, and we did almost all of it. The only thing we didn't do was the installation, and we didn't build the trusses. I designed the trusses, sent them to a truss building company, had them build them for me, and then I had the place insulated because it was cheaper because of economy of scale. But everything else was done by hand. I was the plumber, the wife was the electrician. How did Camille wire the house? I bought her a book at Lowe's, basic home wiring. I said, put 20 amp outlets in everywhere. Go.
It's funny. That's almost an advantage that amateurs have, is that they don't have their pride all invested in their skill set. Like with some quote unquote professional construction people or whatever, they insist on doing things their way, and something like outsourcing the construction of your trusses would be frowned upon. Oh, that's cheating. That's for pussies or something. But no, if it makes sense, it makes sense. Just do it. Shut up.
I wound up trying to build trusses for an outbuilding they built after the house. And they were honestly, when you look at the roof on my outbuilding that I built, you look at it and you go, well, that was an unprofessional job. Right. And, and I thought I'll build a rig and I'll build a jig in order to do it, and we'll get all the angles and we'll lay it out. And no, it didn't work. Not at all. This is what CNC machines and can print and all that. It's so much better than what you can honestly do by hand. And, I did the amateur Amishman thing, and it was great and it was fun and, and all of that. And I know that, worst comes to worst, we can go out and we can build a building tomorrow, or we can retrofit our current building to, house human beings in it if necessary, or whatever we have to do. But I don't want to have to do that. I realize that my time now in what I'm doing is valuable enough that I can pay other people to do it. And as long as I've got somebody that I can trust to come in and do good work for a good price, which I can, because again, my friend Brad, then I'm good to go. And that's how I got the hole in my roof fixed and other things done. And but it's great to have a professional roofer come up and look at the situation and go, yeah, you made this one mistake right here, but otherwise this roof looks great. Like 10 years, 12 years later, going, yeah, you guys did a great job. Like,
yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, there's an outfit here about an hour away from Fort Galt that does prefab homes. And I mean, there's sometimes a stigma around that. People think that they're cheap and crappy or whatever, but man, they are doing some amazing work.
There's some very, very good prefab homes on the market.
Oh, yeah. And they're so fast.
Yeah. Like they can put them up in no time flat. So talk to me a little bit about Fort Galt. So for those of you who don't, I made the mistake of not doing this. We're half an hour into this. You can go to fortgalt.com to see what Gabriel's project looks like and see what the state of things is at this point. But tell me about where you are in the process right now. What's the capacity of where you are, and then where you're going. The two basic questions.
Right. So the first project that died and was a scam and all that was up by Santiago. And when we went back to the drawing board and said, okay, well, where do we want to be? It was not by Santiago, because as you mentioned earlier, I mean, Santiago is not the kind of place someone like us wants to live in. Right. It's about 6 million people, and there's a huge disparity between the very small percentage of wealthy people that live on one side of town and the vast majority of impoverished people that make up the majority of the population. And that is not a good recipe when you're dealing with zombie apocalypse kind of a situation. So you want to be as far away from that mess as possible.
Right.
So we headed like 10 hours south down into the south of Chile, which is very sparsely populated.
Yes.
Basically, Chile is this big, long country that spans from north to south. At the north end, it's the world's driest desert. It's hot. You get great wine production. There's flamingos that live up there and all kinds of stuff. There's still a minefield, actually, so watch your step. But as you go south from there, I mean, you travel through wine country, then you get down into rainforest type area that we're in, and then if you keep going, heck, you go all the way down into Patagonia, which is just like the Yukon or Alaska. Mm-hmm. And then, heck, if you want to hop a plane or a boat, you can keep on going down to Chile's claim of Antarctica. So you can go hang with some penguins or whatever. So there's something for everyone in the country, basically, which is something that I really like. I like to be able to just drive up and down one highway and see basically every kind of topography and climate that there is. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of cool. And basically all of the population is in Santiago. That's the 33rd degree south. So that's like a mirror image of where Los Angeles is. So the climate's pretty much the same as that. And then as you go south from there, that would be the equivalent to driving north from Los Angeles. So the city that we're closest to is called Valdivia. Mm-hmm. And that would be a mirror image of kind of like the northern tip of California, southern Oregon, that kind of a place. Okay. But it's a rainforest that gets a ton of rain during the off season, lots of tourism during the summer. But we found a spot that's right on the ocean, and it's fantastic. I mean, we kind of knew that whatever property we find, it needs appeal. It needs to be the kind of place that people see it from wherever they are in the U.S., Canada, Germany, England, and they say, "Wow, I want to at least visit that." You know, right? Because once you visit, you'll definitely be sold on it, because I was. I mean, it was funny because we knew we wanted to be in this general region, but we didn't know exactly what land we were buying yet. So we told the real estate agent, okay, we really don't have much money to work with. We just need to get started with something small and something affordable. We want it to be relatively close to town for convenience sake, but not so close that we have to deal with all of the downsides of that. Mm-hmm. So we were thinking, okay, maybe half an hour out or 15 minutes out or something. Sure. She completely ignored our point about not having money because we're foreigners. Of course we have money. So she brings us to this $2 million, 100-acre property and knocked her socks off. As soon as I set foot on it, I was sold. I'm like, I don't know how we're going to afford this, but we'll find a way. Right. And so we got to meet the owner, and everything worked out really well. It turns out he's former military. He's kind of a conservative dude. He's got a lot of friends from Army days and stuff, and he kind of had started the property out with self-sufficiency in mind. Right. And 10 years ago, a friend of his started a project for what she had in mind. It was sort of a ecological hippie conservatory community kind of a thing. Mm-hmm. And she did a lot of the preliminary work in terms of getting subdivisions done, putting in some lighting and a water system and, cutting some roadways and stuff like that. But then she died, and the owner didn't really know how to continue without her. So the project just kind of got put on the shelf and forgotten about. But when we met him and explained what we wanted to do, his eyes just lit up and he went, "All righty then, let's just let you handle this and have fun." So it was great because the subdivisions were done, and in order for us to start building, we didn't have to buy out the entire community grounds. Right. He essentially got us to be his exclusive brokers, and we've been able to buy lots as we need them. Right. So that was great for us.
Oh, absolutely.
And everything just worked out really nicely. And that's the kind of thing that if you just swooped into Chile with a whole bunch of cash, you would not have found that deal. You would have thrown your cash at the first thing you saw, and you would have wasted most of it and probably burnt out and went home saying Chile sucks.
No, seriously. I don't think there's any substitute for being on the ground. And when we decided to build,
Yeah.
right, we already lived in this area. We decided we had our choice. We could leave where we were, which is north of Gainesville, which is where we met, went to school, had all our friends, had our infrastructure and all of that. Or we could go somewhere else where it would be, you know, more romantic or whatever we had in our heads. And we said, no, we're going to do it here. And we had the specific knowledge of the area because, again, the wife worked in codes enforcement in Alachua County. Then she worked for Public Works and doing surveys. So she had all this experience reading deeds and looking up, OR book and pages records on all of the properties, and so knew how to deal with that stuff and just had all that experience. So that when we found the right property, and we looked at property for months until the place that we have today showed up on the market on a Monday. We were out there by Saturday morning and took one look at the place and went, this is it. This is by far the best piece of property for the best price. We found it's perfect. It's 25 minutes north of Gainesville. It's not in Alachua County because all the surrounding counties are far cheaper except for Marion, which is where Ocala is. And this is what we want. And we saw, and for the price that we paid for it, we saw people trying to sell us freaking scrubland along US 19 for $500 an acre more. It was insane. I'm like, no, that they had literally logged off and it was now just beach sand with scrub oak on it. And I'm like, yeah, I ain't building on that. Like I'm paying you. And having that specific knowledge helped us tremendously to get through the process. So yeah, it makes so much sense that this project, you had to kind of fail first and be there and get a lay of the land and get an understanding of the people and the culture and all of that first, so that you had the specific knowledge to go, yeah, this is the right piece of property. And then you happen to just meet the right property owner. But that works out more often than you think.
Yeah. And like, I'm not by nature a patient person. Patience is something I've had to learn through the process and come to appreciate because of what I just said, how when you're forced to take your time, it turns out better because you see things and you encounter things that you wouldn't have otherwise. Mm-hmm. And also it's like the development of a new project like this, it's like a really long algebra equation, or like long division, it's like,
or a really long geometry proof.
Yeah, right? It's like
15, 18 step geometry proof.
Right. And it's the first steps that if you screw them up, they'll haunt you throughout the whole rest of it. So,
or you won't get through ever get to stage 4.
If you, do the groundwork well and you get to the point where you're building a particular house on the project and you screw up the roofing of that house, it's not a big deal to do that roofing over again. Okay. But if you're at that point and you suddenly realize, oh, you know what? We bought the wrong property. We started this at the wrong location. It's not so easy to fix that.
Now, once you started, once you broke ground, you're there, right?
Yeah. And, so taking your sweet time in the preliminary first steps is really important. You can rush later when it's not such a big deal, when you're just doing the trimming or something on your house. But so anyway, yeah, these first steps took time and it's been a real process. But right now we've got our first big building up now, and things are, it's really satisfying when everything that you've been dreaming and talking about for several years is finally solid. You can whack it with a stick and point at it and take a picture of it and show people, and
it's having created something is so much more powerful. Well, aside from the fact that now you can talk about it with pride. I can tell you, I look at my house and today I look at all I see are the flaws, but that first couple of years, dude, I was immensely proud of this thing because this was the first thing that I had ever really created that was lasting and was permanent. And I looked around and I said, yep, my daughter's going to be born here, or my child is going to be born here. I didn't know it was going to be a daughter at the time, but she's going to be born here. This is going to be, this is everything. And it was it was a life-changing moment. The first night we stayed here, and I slept on the floor in what was the first bedroom and originally our bedroom. And the first time that first night was really powerful,
Yeah.
And, we went from breaking ground to moving in 7 months. and we weren't done, but we were able to move in, sell the house in that we had in Gainesville, and then we got our certificate of occupancy. We were already living in the place, but we got our certificate of occupancy in that January. So we started in March, and by January we were done. But the first couple of months, that was the hard part: finding the property, getting the plans built, deciding on what you were going to build, what your budget was, all that stuff, and could you put it all together? Yeah, it was crazy. It was good though.
Yeah, and so now we're coming up to the 6-year mark, and looking back, like, you can really appreciate why more people don't do this. It's because not only do very few people have the stomach for that kind of a investment without seeing payoff, but you also have to be able to finance that time.
Yeah.
I mean, very, very few people can make a go of that, and that was part of what kind of steered me down this path too. Is that when I was living in Vancouver, I was in 5 different bands at the same time. I loved playing music and stuff, and
what do you play?
And the drums.
Do you?
And yeah,
nice.
And so that was how I spent all my free time. I'd go out and play gigs and jam with friends and stuff, and I thought, you know what, why can't because that's a huge barrier for why people don't go pro, is they don't have the time to commit to it as a profession. They have to work. And Vancouver is an expensive city.
Yes, it is.
I had to spend the majority of my time just paying the damn bills. And then I only had enough time to put into drumming as kind of a little side hustle. Like, I wasn't able to gather up some really good musicians and say, you know what, let's take a year off and just develop a roster of music and hone our skills and make this a serious thing, because we didn't have the cash stashed away to make that work.
I went through the same thing. I'm a bass player, and I played the drums for about 7 years as well, and I teach myself how to play the guitar now, but I've been playing bass since I'm 15.
I took up the bass recently. Yeah.
No, I still think like a bass player. I approach the guitar like a bass player, and I approach the drums like a bass player, which was really interesting.
Drums and bass are very similar.
Of course they are. Yeah, I am a very percussive bass player.
Yeah.
But I'm really a drummer first, and the bass was just the instrument that I, as a kid, that I was available to me. And that's what happened. And when you watch the live stream, you'll see, if you watch my live streams, my Rickenbacker's hanging on the wall behind me.
I saw that.
Yeah. So, frustrated musician, I get it. And I was talked off of being a professional musician by my mom. And in my own sense of, anxiety and all the rest of it, I'm not blaming it all on her, certainly. But yeah, I know I get it. And I know how hard that is. And
music is just one example, though. I mean, there's so many different career paths that people might go down, but don't, because they can't afford to.
Yep. So we spend way too much time feeding the apparatus that thinks it creates civilization.
Right.
And it's called taxes.
Exactly.
We pay the most onerous taxes in human history, and they tell us that we don't pay enough. Like, these people are out of their mind.
Racket.
Yeah, it is purely nothing more than that. As Rothbard said, it's a gang of thieves writ large. I've tempered some of my more radical stuff in the past few years, but the truth of the matter is that I'm as radical a libertarian as you could ask for. So yeah, like it's not.
I've had
funny.
To temper my language a bit just to be more, compatible with people in conversations. But my philosophy has become more radical than anyone that I think I know. I think I'm the most crazy, insane libertarian that I could even think of.
I'm the same boat. And I have to, kind of ease people into the really hardcore stuff. Because again, my audience is not strictly that. Right. And if it was, it wouldn't be, it would be 1/10 of what it is.
Sort of I've had to come to terms with and make peace with the fact that the majority of humans are not like this.
They really aren't.
And that's okay. They can do their thing as long as they don't force me to be a part of it.
Exactly. And I'll be happy to defend whatever it is that they want to do, as long as, again, they don't force me to do it. I say this all the time. Like, you can create Communitopia next to you, next,
Hmm.
next door to me as long as you want. You just stay away. You just don't force outer Luongolia to,
Definitely.
to go along with Comutopia, because Comutopia is over there, and I'll be happy to trade with Comutopia
Yeah.
at a fair price.
Yep.
But you
For
stay over
sure.
there, and I'll stay over here, and I'll protect your west. It's like I'll protect your western border. It's not that hard, right?
Sure. I'll
So,
even invite you guys over for coffee once in a while, and we
of
can shoot
course,
the shit. And,
I'm not. I'm not averse to people being commies. I'm averse to people
Sure.
forcing me to be a commie. It's like
Exactly.
do what you want, dude. Knock yourself out. That's what works
Yeah.
for you. Great. You know.
Right.
Say,
So I basically became very attracted to all forms of exitarianism. That is like ways of just exiting the circumstances that you're born into and opting out of constructs.
yes.
And there's a lot of efforts to that extent going on right now. For instance, there's the Seasteading Institute,
Mm-hmm.
and my partners and I did some volunteer work for them to do up some 3D models to show off concept art and stuff like that. And they're
Yep.
a great bunch of people too. They're
Sure.
going off in that direction. And then there's the special economic zones that are popping up all over the world. I mean, Shenzhen in China now is a powerhouse of manufacturing that was just a farmers and fishermen village like 20 years ago.
Right.
That kind of economic boom is only possible when you take the statist hands off of it. So
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely.
the effort to create more places like that is underway, and I'm a big fan of that stuff.
Yep.
But I thought, what is something practical that I can do in my life right now to at least carve out a little oasis that I can live in until that stuff comes more into being. So Fort Galt is just sort of an attempt at that. It's not creating a new country or anything like that.
Right.
It's just creating a community that's at least mostly removed from any high density population center, any major statist control grid, somewhere that we can voluntarily opt in to a certain spot and know that our neighbors are all kind of on the same page and they can be counted on not to rat us out, and just that basic kind of stuff that I grew up with.
Right. No, you're absolutely correct, and I've got a lot of respect for trying to pull that off, and it sounds like you've made the transition the right way, and because at the end of the day, look, we may never reach critical mass where we have we beat the statists at their own game. What I can say, and the last thing I want to talk to you about is the role that Bitcoin and all that actually serve in this, because I think the forces of decentralization are all around us, and they're happening. Technology is changing and making it at once. It feels like it's giving the autocrats more power. Like, how desperately do they want worldwide 5G so that they can, they can monitor everything about us all the time, and they're going to, and they want to put chips in us and tell us that we can't travel and all this other stuff. But really, at the end of the day, that's just them trying to spend unbelievable amounts of money, time, and energy on stuff that's completely unsustainable. Humans don't need any of that stuff to live. And at the end of the day, they resist all these forms of control. And technology has created something. When I look at Bitcoin, for example, I see a system that we've never seen before in human history, which is that the creation of new monetary units, which are of an opportunity cost, which have an opportunity cost basis to them, but has no human hand in the rate at which they will be created.
Right.
Is the first time we've ever seen this in human history. Humans still have to work to bring them into existence, but the amount that will come into existence is out of a human being's hands, and therefore is uncorruptible from that perspective. Now, what humans do with in creating credit tokens on top of those monetary units, well, that's a different story, and those are subject to corruption. But at the end of the day, what a proof of work style system creates is that technology, which we've never seen before. And it's the kind of thing that is radical in its effect to decentralize the one thing that the state has always used to enforce any kind of control, which is its ability to stamp the imprimatur of legitimacy on their money. which they always
Right.
undermine over time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Before they always undermine it because the state can't manage itself because it's a terrible manager of its own of its own internal processes because it's an inefficient system that can't function. And so I find it really fascinating that we're at this moment in time where we can choose to have technology enslave us or we have technology liberate us. And the truth of the matter is that it doesn't take a critical mass of people. It doesn't take 90% of the population to adopt the new technology to fundamentally change the way the world operates. It takes less than 5% to get that done. And I think we're very, very close to that at that moment where, and this whole post-COVID world, whatever you want to call it, that's we're going to be moving into, people are going to be asking themselves some very serious questions about the dollar, the system, the banks, all of these things that we'd never had before. And I think it's just very, very, very interesting moment. So, add
Yeah.
color to that. Talk about that.
Well, it's similar to the special economic zones that I mentioned before. Like we have Hong Kong and Shenzhen and Abu Dhabi and Dubai. These places exist. And even though their inhabitants make up a tiny, tiny percentage of the world's population, they're leading by example. They're serving as a beacon. They're demonstrating a concept that cannot be ignored.
Mm-hmm.
And others will follow that because you can't dispute the outcomes. And Bitcoin has done the same thing. Like we don't need everyone to use Bitcoin. We just need enough people to use it to demonstrate its utility and its superiority.
Right.
And I mean, people love to jump in at first and make fun of it, saying, "Oh, it's just tulip mania" or something like that. But
I've never understood that.
Well, the key difference here is that this is the first time where the value, like first of all value is subjective.
Yes.
And so it fluctuates depending on how people value it at that time for whatever reasons. But a tulip has no utility.
Yes.
So that its value is strictly mania. It's not based on usefulness. Right. Whereas you look at Bitcoin and we're living proof of how useful it is. We use it all the damn time. We have people in Germany, Australia, England, US buying property from us over the internet in a matter of minutes, paying for it without any interference from their bank, without any limitations from their governments, without the SEC getting on our backs. What else can you do that with? You can't do that with gold even.
No, you can't, because you can't even move the gold around.
I mean, gold is
world.
Pretty. I like gold as much as the next guy, but it's kind of useless by comparison.
Well, token, I think one of the things I agree at a certain level, but I also believe that gold represents the other form of money, which is that it has antecedent value. The important part of this is just basically Mises's regression theorem. And by the way, you're speaking to the guy who explained Mises's regression theorem in terms of Bitcoin on the Bitcoin forums back in 2010. They're gone now. The original ones first figured it out and then explained it to all the guys at Lew Rockwell at the Mises Institute. I used to chat with Mike Rosef behind the scenes. He was the first one to get my argument. Everybody else, Tom Woods and the rest of them were all going, "Oh, this is just nonsense." I'm like, "No, you missed the point."
Yeah.
If encrypted packets on the internet can have antecedent value because they contain valuable information, then guess what? Then they have value. Then Bitcoin can have value. And then eventually, about 4 or 5 years later, I think Peter DeBoer or somebody else finally wrote an article about adding to Mises's regression theorem the understanding that just because it didn't have value before it was created doesn't, when it comes into existence, you can assign value to it, it means it had antecedent value, that there was a pent-up demand for this thing, this commodity that didn't exist to this point, but there was a demand for it. And
I've had people tell me,
once they say it happened, it was over. It's so very obvious. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I've had people tell me that Bitcoin is useless via email.
I know.
Think about that.
I know. Exactly. No, it's crazy when you stop to think about and it really comes down to, I think, and there's a lot of gold bugs out there who are just angry because gold has been suppressed through the futures market by the powers that be in order to stop it from, and it has been, and there's no argument about that. But that doesn't mean that you can't, just because you love gold doesn't mean you can't also love Bitcoin. It doesn't also mean that that at the end of the day, maybe tokenized version, proof of work, tokenized stored gold might not become a better version of Bitcoin. It's not Bitcoin per se that is the thing. It's the technology that underlies Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin is alpha code that went viral. I don't think it's a particularly good coin. I don't even think it's a particularly good coin.
Right.
I have like there's at least 6 other proof of work style coins out there that are so much better than Bitcoin. And I think there's so many other ways of the security muling and all this other stuff that you can do, and within the blockchain, within cross blockchain security and all this stuff that we can be doing to make a better world in the crypto markets, which is happening, by the way. It's happening in coins like Komodo and others. It's all over the place. The question is, it's not even about market acceptance at this point. What it's really about is people just understanding that the state is a bad steward of money. Yeah. And that's what's coming. And now that we actually have a reliable thing that has the trust of billions of people or millions of people and hundreds of billions of dollars of real value, right? When you start to think of it in those terms, the market is voting right now that Bitcoin is a safe haven asset, like it or not. Yeah. And it's a very powerful thing what's happening, and it's going to change the world. It may not change the world in the next 5 years. It may still take 10, maybe even take 15 years for private cryptos to finally beat government currencies. But it's better technology. It's going to win.
And it's just one of the killer apps that's coming from this shift in mentality. Like we also have distributed manufacturing. We have 3D printing now, and we're almost at the point where gun laws don't even matter. Yep. Because you can regulate and outlaw all the pieces of a gun if you want to, which is absurd, but try. But the printer can spit one out when you need it, So you don't actually have to have guns on hand. You just have to have a damn good printer.
And I got news for you. Stamping freaking metal brass casings and making nitrocellulose is not hard.
You don't even need those now. Dude, you need to check out pre-charged pneumatic rifles. They have come a long way recently.
Wow, really cool. It's even better. Thank you.
Oh, there's
libertarian talking guns. Oh, it's going to become a religious experience.
Guns are my religion. But no, there's a 30 cal full auto air gun coming out in June, and I am waiting for that. It's going to be insane.
Is it subsonic?
No, it's 1,000 feet per second.
Oh my God, Jesus.
It's crazy.
Technology. I love it.
That's why you don't need no brass, no powders, just an air compressor, dude. You're set.
We're at this point where this is why I said the other day, we can see them crapping their pants on television when we bother to tune in. We can see it. It's so very obvious at this point. And I really, we're going to probably cut this off soon because we're right around the hour mark, and I don't go on too long. I'd be happy to have you on another point in the future. We'll talk again. But you can see what's happening, that projects like yours are the way that we should express ourselves in this. I said this the other day. At the end of the day, we have to just stop listening to them. And when they say, "Oh, you're going to do this, and this," they're going to show up at your church service this Sunday. We're recording this the day before Easter, the Saturday before Easter. This is not Tuesday morning. And they're going to show up at your church service tomorrow. When the police show up, you shouldn't get angry. You shouldn't pull your guns. You shouldn't do any of that stuff. You just look at them and go, "Dude, take your hat off. It's church. What's wrong with you?" And literally just look at them and go, why are you here?
Disregard the constabulary.
It's just like, you're just, I hate to say this, but it's the truth is, I don't even hate to say it. I hate to tell people at the end of the day, they're just mafia goons with badges.
Yeah.
That's what they are. And my dad was one of them for a long time, and he hated it. I was talking about this on my live stream last night, and that wakes people up when you have that when they have that knowledge. It's like, there's no service involved here. The men of conscience who become police officers don't do it for anything other than they have to feed their families.
Yeah, and in the present climate, they have no reason not to. Because everyone respects the badge, everyone bows to them and licks their boots and shit. So I mean, why would they even think of changing?
And unfortunately, it when you create that culture, it attracts the wrong person to the job. It doesn't
Absolutely.
it doesn't attract a man of conscience who's not doing it to arrogate power to himself,
Yeah.
and who is trying to keep his community safe and is going
Right.
into with those reasons. And people who join the military for those also noble reasons, right?
Hmm.
Um, you're encouraging the people who do want to rule over other people and exercise petty power. And the worst part is that even if you do get people in that job who did go into it for the right reasons, the process itself is corrupting to the point where no matter what you do, you will be broken down. Enough people will be broken down by it. I can tell you that, like, I had to leave state service, even though I had a very comfortable job. I had to leave state service because I could feel my work ethic and my just getting destroyed. I could feel my soul going away. And I'm like, I've got to get out of this. And I literally left a state job that I could have had for the rest of my life and never worry about it, and would have got a nice raise from my boss to do this to stay. And I went and I worked for a startup 300 miles away from my home while my wife was 6 months pregnant. And she was still tiling the bathroom in the extension in our house.
Yeah.
This is what we did. And we did it because it was the right thing to do.
Right.
So these are the kinds of examples you want to leave. This is why I was so happy to speak to you this morning, because to me, talking with other people who have made those kinds of decisions and have done and did it earlier in their life than I did, and it sounds like you're far younger than I am. I'm 52. Is really encouraging, because I see it. I see that same thirst for purpose,
Right.
unexpressed in so many people around me. And they want to have purpose. They want to have a direction, but they don't see that. They don't see it around them. They don't see the options. But they've been beaten down to a point where they don't believe there are any options. And we've got to get that back to them.
They're straight up
way.
told that there are no options.
Right.
The authority figures all around them tell them from day one that there's this preset path for you. You can choose a couple different variations of it, but that's it.
Right. And we want to get them out of that.
Yeah.
And that's our job. So, Gabriel,
Right
this
on.
has been an absolute blast chatting with you. I haven't talked with frankly, a flower throwing hardcore anarcho-capitalist in a long time, and I enjoyed it. So we're gonna cut it off here and let you go for the day. But I'd love to have you back on at some point in the future. We can get an update on what's going on with Fort Galt, and if anybody who wants to check this out and maybe and see what's available or what options are available, go out, check out fortgalt.com. You have a great day, and go thou forth and build more buildings and build a better community, because that's
right on.
what
Thanks.
All right.
All right. Take care then.
Thank you, man. You have a great day. Well, that's another show, and I appreciate everybody coming in to listen. This has been episode 29. I enjoyed that conversation. It's fun to sit down and just talk to somebody who reminds you of where you come from in a certain sense. I've been kind of spending so much time dealing with the day-to-day politics and the day-to-day tactics and strategy that you just kind of forget to get back down to brass tacks and kind of talk about the first principles and all that. And it's something I attempted with my chat with Lou Rockwell back in December, but it didn't come off the way I would like to. I think there was definitely audio problems then. So that being said, if you guys like what you heard today, as always, you can follow me at tomluongo.me. You can follow me on Twitter at TFL1728. We have live streams that happen every Monday night at 8 p.m. and Friday night at 8:30 on my YouTube channel. Just search for me, you'll find it. And we'll see you next week. And I have a couple of guests booked up for the next couple of weeks, so everything should be kind of cool. I certainly hope so. So you guys take care. You be well. We'll talk soon. And keep your stick on the ice.